In the final year of his life, Malcolm X's journey to Africa was recorded in history as nothing more than a spiritual transformation. According to the narrative we were told during this pilgrimage to Mecca, he discovered new ideas about racial harmony and returned to America as a completely different man. But was the truth really that simple? Recently declassified CIA and KGB archives reveal a never-before-told side of that 72-day journey. Malcolm X didn't just go on Hajj, he conducted a series of secret meetings with the Soviet intelligence service, the KGB. These encounters were not chance meetings. They were planned, systematic, and extremely dangerous. This story investigates the most mysterious period of Malcolm X's life. What really happened during that journey from April to July 1964? Why did the KGB seek contact with one of America's most controversial civil rights leaders? And what role did these secret meetings play in Malcolm's assassination 9 months later? Subscribe for more declassified historical stories related to Malcolm X. The early months of 1964 marked a major turning point for Malcolm X. He had broken away from the Nation of Islam, severed his ties with Elijah Muhammad, and embarked on a search for a new path. But he wasn't as alone as it appeared. The Muslim Mosque Inc. and Organization of Afro-American Unity that he founded in March were not just local organizations. Malcolm X was formulating a much larger plan. He wanted to transform the civil rights struggle in America into an international issue. For this, he needed allies. The first stop would be Mecca, but the real target was to meet with leaders fighting for independence across Africa. Ghana, Nigeria, Uganda, Kenya. Leaders in all these countries were condemning the oppression of black citizens in America. Malcolm X wanted to organize this support, but another power was also watching Malcolm X closely, the Soviet Union. Moscow's initial contact with Malcolm X actually began long before his African journey. After the police brutality incident at the Nation of Islam's temple in Los Angeles in 1962, the KGB's American division began reporting on Malcolm X as a potential asset. The logic of Soviet intelligence was straightforward. As racial tensions increased in America, the country's internal stability would be shaken, strengthening the Soviets' hand in the Cold War. A radical leader like Malcolm X could play a key role in this process. According to KGB secret documents, a special meeting had been held in Moscow before Malcolm X's African journey. The participants included the head of the KGB's Third Chief Directorate and officers responsible for African operations. The decision was clear. Contact would be established with Malcolm X. A coded telegram from Moscow to Soviet embassies in Cairo, Accra, and Lagos contained a simple directive: extend cultural invitations to visiting American religious leader. Malcolm X's African journey began on April 13, 1964. His first stop was Cairo. The official program seemed perfectly ordinary. He would visit Al-Azhar University and meet with religious leaders. But in Cairo, he received an unexpected invitation. A diplomat from the Soviet embassy invited Malcolm X to attend a cultural event at the embassy. Malcolm X accepted this invitation, but the security officer accompanying him recorded this meeting. That security officer, in testimony given years later, said Malcolm emerged from the embassy very different. He was thoughtful and excited. He told me, "The world is much more complex than we thought." According to KGB archives, Soviet diplomats presented Malcolm X with scientific data about the condition of black citizens in America. They also explained how the Soviets supported independence movements in Africa. But the most important topic was potential support for Malcolm X's new organization. The meeting lasted 3 hours. Malcolm X was shown statistical reports about racial violence, economic data about poverty in black communities, and analyses of civil rights movements in other countries. "Your struggle is not isolated," the Soviet diplomat told Malcolm X. "From Algeria to Angola, oppressed peoples are fighting for freedom. The question is, are you ready to join this international movement?" Malcolm X didn't give an immediate answer, but he asked for more information about Soviet support for other liberation movements. After Cairo, Malcolm X moved on to Ghana. Here he had a historic meeting with President Kwame Nkrumah. But Nkrumah was not just Ghana's leader. He was also one of the most important figures of the Pan-Africanism movement and had close ties with the Soviets. During the 3 weeks he spent in Ghana, Malcolm X met not only with local leaders but also with advisors from other countries. One of these advisors was an academic from East Germany, who was later understood to have connections with the KGB. Maya Angelou, the American writer living in Ghana at the time, described her time with Malcolm X. Malcolm was constantly taking notes. He kept detailed records about every person he met. It was as if he was gathering pieces of a large project. According to KGB documents, Malcolm X was promised support for the African Union to bring America's racial discrimination issue to the United Nations. But this support didn't come free. The Soviets offered Malcolm X something unprecedented: international legitimacy, financial resources, and a global platform. In return, they expected information about the American civil rights movement and Malcolm X's commitment to presenting America's racial problems as an international human rights crisis. Malcolm X's time in Nigeria's capital, Lagos, was perhaps the most mysterious part of his entire journey. According to official records, he stayed there for only 3 days. But what really happened? A document in the KGB archives details a secret meeting held with Malcolm X in Lagos. This meeting took place in a suite on the top floor of a hotel, and among the participants were Shern, an officer responsible for the KGB's African operations, Malcolm X's trusted assistant. At this meeting, Malcolm X was made a concrete offer: financial support for his newly established Organization of Afro-American Unity, educational materials, and international recognition. In return, Malcolm X would provide regular reports on his activities in America and would not act contrary to Soviet interests. Malcolm X did not immediately accept this offer. He asked for time to think. The specifics were remarkable. The Soviets promised $50,000 in initial funding, scholarship programs for young Black Americans to study in Soviet universities, and guaranteed that Malcolm X's message about racial oppression would be broadcast globally through Soviet media outlets. Malcolm X remained cautious. "I need guarantees," he said. "I won't be anyone's puppet. If I accept your help, it will be to serve my people's interests, not yours." Meanwhile, back in America, the FBI was in a state of high alert. J. Edgar Hoover was having Malcolm X's African journey closely monitored. FBI agents working with local intelligence services in each country were reporting Malcolm's movements. A classified FBI report dated May 28, 1964, contained the following statements. Subject: Malcolm X is in contact with representatives of multiple communist countries. The nature and purpose of these contacts is being investigated. Immediate detention of subject upon return to America is being considered. The FBI's investigation quickly uncovered disturbing evidence. Wiretaps revealed that Malcolm X was receiving regular communication from Soviet embassies in Africa. Financial surveillance showed unexplained income flowing into his organizations. J. Edgar Hoover personally briefed President Johnson. "This individual poses a clear and present danger to American national security. His international connections make him the most dangerous Negro leader in the country." The last stop of the African journey was Algeria. This place was special because Algeria was a respected revolutionary country in both Africa and the Arab world. It was also one of the Soviet Union's strongest allies. The final meeting with Malcolm X in Algeria determined his fate. This time, the KGB representative spoke very directly. "Are you ready to cooperate when you return to America?" Malcolm X's response was surprising. "I would cooperate with the devil himself if necessary for my people's freedom, but I won't allow the devil to own me." This answer sent a message to both sides. Yes, he could cooperate, but on his own terms. The Soviet operative presented him with a detailed operational plan. Establish study groups using Soviet-provided materials. Coordinate with other civil rights leaders to present American human rights violations to the United Nations. And provide regular intelligence reports about the civil rights movement. Malcolm X insisted on modifications. "I'll take your materials, but I'll decide how to use them. I'll work for international support, but I won't spy on my fellow civil rights leaders." When Malcolm X returned to America on May 21, 1964, he was a completely different person. Not only had his views on race changed, but his understanding of world politics had also undergone a fundamental transformation. His statements at his first press conference were noteworthy. "I now understand that our problem in America is not just a civil rights issue, but a human rights issue. And human rights are universal." These words were the direct result of discussions with the KGB. Malcolm X was now preparing to move the struggle to an international platform. The change in Malcolm X was immediately apparent. His speeches began incorporating new themes: anti-imperialism, international solidarity, and the connection between domestic racism and global oppression. These were central tenets of Soviet foreign policy propaganda. Betty Shabazz later recalled noticing significant changes in her husband. He seemed more serious, more burdened. He talked about responsibilities to oppressed people everywhere. Looking at Malcolm X's activities after returning from Africa, it's possible to see traces of KGB support. Where was the financing for the Organization of Afro-American Unity coming from? How was Malcolm constantly traveling and funding his operations? An FBI report provides the answer. Subject's foreign financial support is being investigated, Multiple suspicious sources have been identified. The FBI's investigation revealed a complex network of financial support flowing to Malcolm X's organizations. Money was coming through donations from sympathetic African governments, payments for speaking engagements arranged by Soviet cultural organizations, and direct transfers from Cuban intelligence front companies. Malcolm X's speeches during this period reveal Soviet influence. He began using Marxist terminology, critiquing American capitalism as inherently racist, and presenting the civil rights struggle as part of a global anti-imperialist movement. The same government that oppresses black people in Mississippi is oppressing people in the Congo, in Vietnam, in Latin America, Malcolm X declared. Our struggle is connected to liberation movements around the world. Malcolm X was playing a very dangerous balancing game. On one hand, he was receiving support from the KGB, while on the other hand, he was trying to maintain his independence. But this balance would not last long. According to FBI observations, some people around Malcolm X began to suspect that he had fallen under communist influences. Even Nation of Islam leaders were considering using this situation for their own benefit. Someone close to Elijah Muhammad said, "Malcolm is now working with America's enemies. This makes him an enemy not only of us, but of his own country." The pressure on Malcolm X was coming from multiple directions. The FBI was monitoring his every move. The Nation of Islam was spreading rumors about his communist connections. Even some of his own supporters began questioning his new international focus. Malcolm X found himself increasingly isolated. In private moments, he confided to close associates, "Everyone wants to use me, but what about what I want? What about what my people need?" In late 1964, Malcolm X made a major mistake. At a meeting of the Organization of Afro-American Unity, he announced that he had made international friends during his African journey, and that these friends were ready to help bring America's racism issue to the United Nations. This announcement triggered all of the FBI's alarms. J. Edgar Hoover immediately coordinated with the CIA and launched a comprehensive investigation into Malcolm X's KGB connections. The FBI's investigation quickly uncovered disturbing evidence. Wiretaps, financial surveillance, and informant reports all pointed to the same conclusion. Malcolm X appeared to be a Soviet intelligence asset. J. Edgar Hoover personally briefed President Johnson about the Malcolm X investigation. This individual poses a clear and present danger to American national security. At the same time, the KGB was also uncomfortable. Malcolm X was beginning to reveal their plans. This situation could endanger the entire operation. Malcolm X's final meeting with the KGB took place just 6 weeks before his death. In January 1965, this meeting was held at a hotel in New York, and Malcolm X went alone. The only witness to this meeting was the hotel's security cameras. According to footage obtained by the FBI, Malcolm X emerged from the meeting very agitated. He argued with security personnel and shouted, "This is the end." What had been discussed? The final document in the KGB archives provides this information. Asset has become uncontrollable. Operation is being terminated. Malcolm X was no longer useful to the KGB. He was acting too independently and posed a risk of exposing their plans. The final meeting was a confrontation. The Soviet operative informed Malcolm X that their support would be ending. The financial assistance would stop. The international platform would be withdrawn. "You used me," Malcolm X accused. "You made promises you never intended to keep." Malcolm X left the meeting knowing that he had lost his most powerful international supporter. He was now truly alone, facing enemies on multiple fronts. The assassination of Malcolm X at the Audubon Ballroom on February 21, 1965, was officially carried out by Nation of Islam militants. But the role of the KGB connection in this assassination was never investigated. There was an interesting detail in FBI reports. 3 days before the assassination, Malcolm X's home was secretly entered, and some documents were stolen. Among these documents were notes related to the African journey and records of meetings with foreign representatives. Who stole these documents? Why did they disappear just before the assassination? The timing was too convenient to be coincidental. Someone wanted to ensure that Malcolm X's international connections would never be fully exposed. In the chaos following Malcolm X's assassination, these missing documents were never recovered. The full extent of Malcolm X's relationship with the KGB only began to emerge after the collapse of the Soviet Union in the 1990s. With the opening of part of the KGB archives, it was understood that Malcolm X had been part of an operation codenamed Project Eagle. The purpose of this project was to destabilize America's internal stability by increasing ethnic and racial tensions. Malcolm X had become part of this project, even if unwillingly. But Malcolm's personal struggle was different. He truly believed in his people's freedom and was ready to take any risk for it. His cooperation with the KGB was just a tool for him. Project Eagle was part of a larger Soviet program to exploit racial tensions in America. The goal was not necessarily to create revolution, but to weaken American society and undermine confidence in American democratic institutions. Malcolm X was an ideal target because of his genuine grievances against American racism, his international perspective, and his willingness to seek support from any source that might advance his people's cause. However, the Soviets underestimated Malcolm X's independence and intelligence. He was willing to accept their support, but he refused to become their puppet. This tension ultimately led to the termination of their relationship and left Malcolm X more vulnerable than ever. Malcolm X's relationship with the KGB is one of the darkest pages in American history. Did this relationship make him a stronger leader, or did it prepare his end? Perhaps both. Thanks to KGB support, Malcolm X transformed from a local civil rights leader into a global figure. His ideas resonated across a wide geography, from Africa to Asia. America's racism issue became an international problem. But at the same time, this relationship brought him face to face with numerous enemies. The FBI began to see him as a national security threat. The Nation of Islam declared him a traitor. Even among his own supporters, suspicions began to arise. The tragedy of Malcolm X is that his greatest strength, his willingness to seek support anywhere for his people's freedom, also became his greatest vulnerability. Malcolm X's story is the story of the impossible choices you face when you have great ideals. When fighting for your people's freedom, which support will you accept? Which risks will you take? His relationship with the KGB was evidence of Malcolm X's pragmatic intelligence. He was a leader who understood the realities of power. But at the same time, this relationship showed how alone he was. In the end, Malcolm X died not as a puppet of the KGB or as a target of the CIA, but as a human being faithful to his own convictions. And perhaps that was his greatest victory. The story of Malcolm X and the KGB reminds us that history is always more complex than official narratives suggest. Heroes are human beings who make difficult choices under impossible circumstances. Malcolm X's willingness to seek international support for the civil rights struggle helped establish the principle that human rights are universal concerns. His efforts to internationalize the American civil rights movement influenced later generations of activists who successfully used international pressure to advance social justice causes. The secret meetings with the KGB were just one chapter in Malcolm X's larger story, a story of a man who refused to accept injustice and was willing to pay any price to advance his people's freedom. That willingness, rather than any specific tactical alliance, was what made Malcolm X dangerous to his enemies and inspiring to his supporters. Today, as we face our own complex international challenges and domestic struggles for justice, Malcolm X's story offers both inspiration and warning. It shows us that seeking justice sometimes requires making deals with imperfect partners, but it also teaches us never to surrender our independence or compromise our core values. Malcolm X's 72 days in Africa changed him, challenged him, and ultimately contributed to his death. But they also helped transform him from a national figure into an international symbol of resistance to oppression, a symbol that continues to inspire people around the world more than half a century after his assassination. The secret meetings with the KGB were a footnote to that larger transformation, but they remain a crucial reminder that even heroes must navigate complex moral terrain in pursuit of justice.